these devices getting out, you know, I think of the market share of Manhattan or mobile security products or mobile device management, and we realize that we are probably under 5% of enterprise devices that have any kind of meaningful security on them. And there is a lot of bad things that probably are happening every day, but the old saying, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, did it really fall? Did it matter? If somebody finds a device and gets into a lot of information and does a small and makes a little bit of money and the company doesn't get in trouble and nobody finds out about it, did it really happen? Did anybody care? And I propose these things are happening every day, we just don't see them. And the last expression I use, I've taken thanks to Wendy's, and maybe you guys remember when somebody put a finger in the chili and it made the front page of the news. So I call this the finger in the chili problem. This is when something happens and maybe you weren't even at fault, but suddenly you're on the front page of the news. And there's never really been this huge mobile security breach that's happened to this point. And so we've gotten into this false sense of security. It's the black swan must not exist because I've never seen one, or gee, you know, not to pull up a really bad event, but nobody would ever fly a plane into a building, kind of a thing. And the fact that nobody has thought through all of these devices and the interactions, and especially I would say it prima facie at the business level. I certainly think people are thinking about how do we secure the grid and how do we secure when cars start driving themselves that they don't get attacked. But in terms of things, how do I make sure my files don't get lost? How do I make sure when some device gets lost, it's not compromised, that users can't squirrel away a lot of data, things like that. So we've got this really great panel here today to talk about these things. And we've got Chris Huff from the Weather Channel, who's Vice President of Mobile and Consumer Apps. We've got Jim Gwynn from PricewaterhouseCoopers, who runs their security and technology practice. Phil, the hardest part of these days is always some of the last names or the names, but Edka Willie.
You got it. Oh.
Or he said, just go with Phil A., which I could have done. But Chief Information Security Officer for Cox Communications. And finally, Dr. Humayun Zafar, Assistant Professor of Information Security Assurance at Kennesaw State. And this group is going to give 2 or 3 minutes on their views of mobile security. And then we're going to ask a handful of questions that have been prepared, but I really want the questions to come out of the audience. So please be thinking about what are the things that you really want to know about security, privacy, and the interrelation of those as we get deeper into this. So we'll start over here with Chris.
Thanks. So when I think about security, I think about it's always easier to look back in technology to see kind of some mistakes we made in the past. One of my favorite technology innovations was the muscle car. So when I think back in the 60s and 70s, there was this proliferation of muscle cars, right? You had 400 horsepower cars. You had this freeways that were just starting out. You have 4-lane freeways crossing the states. You've got no seatbelt regulation, and so there was this exuberance that exceeded the safety precautions, the guardrails, if you will. So I think it's a good analogy with where we are in mobile, right? We've got this almost exceeding our ability to protect consumers. So that's how I think of it, and I think there's a lot of opportunities. At the Weather Channel, we take a lot of care to protect our customers, and I think safety is the best policy in that regard, but I think there is going to be something that changes the tide with this and makes this come to the forefront in users' minds.
And to the audience, remember that the Weather Channel gets an awful lot of private data of location. And let's think about this as we're thinking about some questions. Jim, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. As was shared earlier, my name is Jim Gwynn. I'm with PwC. I lead our mobile security core team for the U.S. firm. So we get a lot of experience and exposure to various security platforms or security issues as they relate to mobility or technology in general. I would challenge the audience and also the panel to think about security far beyond just the information security that sits on a device. That can be managed, that can be wiped, that can be cleaned. But think about security in the context of business security, right? And securing your business or your business assets or the concepts around your business. things that we'll talk to clients about or things that you should be thinking about is as you embark on significant employees or your staff or your teams are, where are they actually doing that work? Where are they doing it, and is it okay that they're doing that work from a particular place, a state, a region, a country, right? If you think about the way the business was done previously, people in, say, oil and gas or in industrial manufacturing that travel all over the globe, they might actually go and call on a client or meet a client and do a transaction verbally and then come back to their home office in the United States and type that up and send it out. And they've actually created maybe a taxable event. What happens with mobility on a tablet or some sort of a phone or a mobile device where I can actually create an order right there? And I did it in a foreign entity that I don't have any sort of legal entity to actually pay for taxes in that area. So you also need to think about securing the business and not information security on the device, and how you actually use that device and what the use cases are around that device and the applications they have. So we try to open our clients' perspectives up much broader than just information security. Much to your conversation, the muscle cars, first thing's the safety belt, then the nader bolt, then windshields that are laminated. We're trying to expand the conversation, not just one step at a time, but further reaching across security for the business.
That's great. Phil?
Good morning. So start off by a crowd participation. Everybody repeat after me. Freedom. Freedom. Security. Security. Convenience. Convenience. Okay, I just trained you in that order. Freedom, security, convenience. Right, and so I won't say that I'm very old, but from when I was young, I always dreamed of the mobile lifestyle. So in the early 90s, I was one of those folks that bought into a vision from a company that no longer exists called USR Robotics. They came out with a technology called the Palm, quickly acquired by 3Com, became the Palm Pilot Pro. I bought every single device. That device was running on an operating system that I thought sucked. And I was brought into the world of Windows, and I started buying subcompact notebooks from China and Japan as fast as I can import them. And so I bought in '95, bought my first Toshiba Libretto. It was a subcompact computer about this big. It ran Windows NT 3.5. And I continued to buy mobile technologies as they evolved. Right, so from Microsoft's Pocket PC to Windows Mobile, all the way through until my eyes opened up in 2007 with the first Apple device, right, with the first iPhone. And who would have thought that it all started connecting all these different capabilities that weren't existing in that several decades before that. Mobility, high-speed internet, 3G, right? It started bringing cloud, ubiquitous app. It wasn't just heavy-duty applications, it was app capabilities, and it brought it into this little device, right? And what's interesting is, this little device, who would have thought, this little light, right, could be done out of a phone. But have you guys ever taken a look in the App Store on both Android and Apple and taken a look at what permissions these things are asking for? Your full contact data, your network access to your email. And the reality is, with the Edward Snowden leak this summer, what it really did was taint my vision of that mobile space. And I think the reality is, and we'll talk further, I think is, where do we stand today from a security, from a privacy perspective? And we're finding a lot about our environment today on what people's perception of privacy means. They will post everything that they can. They will download every application. They could do it geography. I can plop a Square device on this and take a, or in the US or in Russia, where do the taxes come from? Where's the liability of that sale happen? And so I agree that mobility is about to change a whole bunch of things, but at what cost? And so I'm going to end it with where I started. Repeat after me. Freedom. Security. Convenience. In that order.
So you guys can't see this, but everybody does have a mobile device in front of them. Phil actually has two, other than Jim, who's got a pad of paper in front of him, which means we all use mobile differently and at different times, and that's one of the great things about it.
That's
so
a Palm Pilot,
this is
actually.
this is the conundrum here. Humayun.
Well, like Alan introduced me earlier, my name is Dr. Humayun Zafar. I'm an assistant professor Director of Information Security and Assurance. Sad part about going up at the end is that everyone's going to talk about what I was supposed to talk about. So I'll copy yours, though. I'll go with a show of hands. Just say Pearl Harbor, who's heard of it? What comes to mind? I presume the same thing, the movie. Tylenol, 80s, cyanide. TJ Maxx. I'd say late 2000, I'd say 2007, 2008. Is that you guys see a relationship here? Each one almost started off something. Of course, one started off the end of the war, really. Tylenol was really interesting in terms of, hey, what happens when you're breached? Should you just come out and just be honest about it? Does it help you out? TJ Maxx. Anyone here ever use a credit card at TJ Maxx? May want to get a new credit card. Cost a lot of money. You mentioned earlier that, I think you kind of alluded to it, that we haven't had that kind of an event in this space, meaning mobile security. We really have not. And that's the one that probably worries me the most. I think the mobile security space is not really that well defined. Maybe that's the reason why. I sometimes research and teach in these areas, and I flip-flop. I go from financial, banking industry, and security aspects there to more about a policy-oriented thing, to a consumer-focused thing, and to more recently, a walking HIPAA violation, the healthcare mobile security aspect. Anyone here ever worked, or anyone on a pacemaker? Can I even ask that? Is anyone on a pacemaker here now?
A voluntary question.
Voluntary. Just assume you are. All right, let's leave it at that. Modern day pacemaker transmits stuff remotely. With pacemakers, it gets a little tricky because not only are they ubiquitous, you really can't encrypt everything on them because, well, for one, they're tiny. So we have a resource issue there as well. Where would that Pearl Harbor style event occur in mobility? And that's the question I ask in my research and my students, and no one can really come up with that. But we have all the...
To pick any vendor out there. If it doesn't have a direct impact on me, I just gloss over. And quite frankly, the majority of the users, the majority of the folks who use these devices are probably sitting in your class or that we just recently hired straight out of school. They really don't understand the impact of what they're doing.
But I'll disagree in that there was a wireless intrusion protection industry that was really a low-level business, and then TJ Maxx happened. And all of a sudden, that was a business that went through the roof. At least people that, back to my comment of Wilford Brimsley, I'm the guy in the room who's paid to be nervous when nobody else is. At least some people woke up, and every retailer in the world put in precautions and protections so that it didn't do another 50 and another 50 and another 50, and it was an awakening of the vulnerability of the networks and the credit card data. I don't think anything like that has happened in mobile.
No, so to that point, it hasn't, or it has happened in small bursts, right? Or it's happened in isolated incidents. The reality, or my opinion, not necessarily my firm's opinion or any, just my personal opinion.
Same disclaimer for all of us, by the way.
We're taught to say that. But these devices, mobility in totality, in the broadest sense of the enterprise, is not about the device that a human being has or they interact with. It's about the infrastructure that that device can sustain. So whether you look at, any of the FedExes of the world, the UPSs of the world, or any of the companies that move packages and freight from one place to another, that's all done with mobile technology, and it's done with mobile security so that things get RFID tagged or barcode scanned or run through and zapped and picked up, and we know where things are. Those systems are where vulnerability, not for those particular companies, but those systems, industrial control, process control, SCADA systems, are where the Pearl Harbors might actually occur because they have the broadest impact against our economy or our nation or any particular critical infrastructure component that is necessary. It's not going to happen from personal usage. I mean, with all due respect to the Weather Channel, it's not going to happen because someone hacked in and they got my credentials and they know where I am from the Weather Channel. Who really cares?
Unless your
right?
credentials from the Weather Channel are the same ones on your LinkedIn, Facebook account.
But that's an individual. That's an individual attack that happened to an individual. That is not a broad, sweeping industrial meltdown.
And mobility is about personalization. The different tensions that are going on in the world are there's corporations and there's government that have the tension where they want to personalize you so they can sell better to you or better track you. And what we've learned since this summer is The government is connected to every major peering point on the internet. They can see everything going on that's not encrypted. What we know now, too, is the government can track you even when these things are turned off. What we know now is...
Back in Atlanta. How do you deal with privacy and protection of that privacy, and how do you think of the Pearl Harbor event as it would affect your business?
So, I mean, our biggest principle in that regard is don't keep data that you don't need. A lot of people keep a lot of data just in case they might need it one day. And our policy is if we don't need it, we can ask for it later. And I think that's actually kept us out of trouble by and large. I think from a consumer standpoint, if you think about it, mobile brought consumers into the enterprise, right? It was the thing that started the consumerization of IT. And so now it's not just that enterprises are aware of the issue.
Putting convenience or lack of thoughtfulness in front of some areas?
Absolutely. A great question. I think probably because I just keep going back to that Pearl Harbor, TJ Maxx style scenario, especially town hall. If you've lived through those times and you've studied that kind of history, you will have a particular mindset as far as security goes. Whereas the 20-year-olds, and I'd go as far back as, let's say, the 15-year-old, the 12-year-old, the 10-year-old, single digits, 9-year-olds are working with tablets. I think we're talking about your kid as well. They were born and raised in this environment. This is the generation of iPads, whatever generation.
Devices and things like that. An event of the magnitude will be in very large numbers.
Those folks are the ones that are going to win in this
You may not know what kind of
in
limitation.
the new economy. And so I'm not poo-pooing this stuff. I'm preaching education. Be aware of what you're doing.
I think there's
Desensitized. I mean, if you look at last week, right, Miss Teen USA was tapping into her computer and privately videotaping
Will have a heart attack. Someone will live to be a
photos.
Greatly outweighing the downside.
Absolutely.
Another question?
Great. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Hamish Caldwell. I'm with
And I think there's a huge opportunity there to kind of change kind of the first version of the internet, the way we've seen it and operated in it, to be much more secure. And we've also heard from other countries that are outraged on what's happened with the U.S. and the NSA, that like Brazil, they're looking to disconnect directly from the internet, from the American internet, and move to exchanges abroad on the other side of the pond. There's countries like China that have already built firewalls around their environment and building their own ecosystems. I think we will see multiple instances of private networks that are geolocation oriented. And I think what's going to be interesting is watching kind of the privacy and security experts see how they can maneuver around that to start almost a new paradigm of how the internet operates. It's not just a series of routers and carrier networks. It'll be meshed private networks from person to person. They may even network from house to house. And so there's whole business opportunities, I think, that will explode out of this that we've never thought, we would never dreamed imaginable. You know, who would ever thought that, you know, when you talk to, here's my iPhone versus my Android phone, Siri, you know, anybody here watch Star Trek? Well, Siri is that computer voice talking to the World Wide Web. You know, you have the computer of Star Trek come to life. And I think there's more opportunities like that that will connect the entire planet you can talk directly to, and the world's data will be at your fingertips. And how we interact with that and how we safely do it, we're all just getting to just the beginnings of it.
Do you mind?
If I can, real quick, just to try to answer your question very tactically. In the world that we live in, if I know who you are and I can authenticate who you are, then I want to do a transaction with you. So if you think about things from an entrepreneur perspective, whether it's technology, it's solutions, it's applications or process, whether it's a mesh network or not, if you think about it from that perspective, I'll do business with you. Or I'll recommend to our clients that they should do business in that manner, right? So if you're looking for opportunities, think from an authentication perspective, out-of-band, multi-factor, whatever it may be. Think in that regard so that I can ensure I know who you are and I've authenticated who you are so that I can do that transaction at a business layer.
Identity.
That's what I would focus on.
Identity, right? Identity.
You mind? I don't think there's anything more powerful than the young people. What ideas are you seeing coming out of them? Or are you seeing a lot of the universities are coming up with a rich ecosystem of their grad students, et cetera. Are you seeing any great shifts out there or ideas?
There There are two parts to that answer. First is the teaching aspect, and we're just now catching up with just good old-fashioned security. This idea of a firewall, for example, we've talked about it before. It really does not exist in a mobile space. But the other aspect is the research one, where you're beginning to see a lot of work being done. So for a business, to answer your question, some of the opportunities that lie are in the kind of human resource you may have access to over here. Students are definitely interested in this if they see the value proposition. In other words, can they get a job? Sole reason why we get a lot of InfoSec majors. Earlier in that intro video, there were only 3 universities, I think, that were highlighted. I may be forgetting. I think Georgia State, Kennesaw State, and Emory. But there are 31 state institutions in this state. There are 20-something tech schools. That's over 50 in a state the size of Georgia, and really I think 48 are in Atlanta. So the space is very rich for you, and really you need to almost engage with universities in many ways as well, because honestly we sometimes don't have the resources for it. As much as I talk about breaking into a ubiquitous healthcare device, that's going to take some lab you don't have access to. So it's sometimes a theoretical concept. Every once in a while it can actually be done for real, I think, as well.
But mobility has also changed for the
To me, it's as simple as making it clear to the
purchasing 51. And the reality is
allowing me to
every other comment was, hey, my kid spent $50, which is what happened to me. I spent $100, also happened to me. And so this game was actively defrauding as a freeware game who they knew their customer base was, which is student kids. And I agree with you. I think there is a time where we're going to probably go back